Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages. We have reached the end of another year. 2024 is reaching a close, and I always like to have a little bit of a retrospective where I look back at the games that we've played, kind of like give my final thoughts and sort of like arrange them into games that I absolutely overwhelmingly adored and games that I wouldn't necessarily recommend. Um, we did play 14 games, and I'm going to be doing a rough ranking. Now, I'll be the first to say, like, I'm going to be dividing these into like four categories between great games, good games, average games, and bleh games. So don't get too fixated on like, oh hey, this game did better than this game. If they're both in the average category, they're largely equivalent. I just like based on like gut feel, I have to present them in a certain order. So don't hold that against me, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But, um, big thing to know about that. No. I'm sorry. I'm an absolute goof. I'm being a goofball right now, and I don't feel bad about it. But um, the rules for consideration is that I have to have beaten the game this year. Keyword there is beaten. So, like, obviously, I'm not going to be talking about Pathfinder Kingmaker because, well, I mean, I'm not finished with it yet. I can't give it a rating if I haven't finished it. Second rule is I have to no longer be actively playing it. That's primarily for things like DLCs where I don't consider the game done until I'm finished playing it. But I will say, in specifically in the case of Borderlands 2, um, like I haven't played the Commander Lilith DLC, but I'm also not actively playing it. And I don't know when I'll get back to the Commander Lilith DLC. So I don't want to wait and give my thoughts on Borderlands 2 until some uncertain point in the future. But if I was still actively playing the DLC, I wouldn't consider myself done with the game, and so it would end up being on next year's list. And then lastly, thirdly, obviously, the game has to have an ending. I'm not putting Hearthstone Battlegrounds in here. I'm not putting, Heroes of the Storm. It has to be a game that at some point the credits roll and you stop playing. So, with that said, first and foremost, the Bleh game, Guild of Dungeoneering. So, Guild of Dungeoneering was an interesting idea, and I enjoyed the premise of it, but I just feel like the game wasn't deep enough for how much time commitment it wanted. Like, I definitely noticed towards the end, I was like, ah, it's just a whole bunch of locations on the map, and you click them and more show up. And I just got so unbelievably, I won't say bored, but unbelievably, like, kind of done with the Guild Engineering experience. I think the big problem is twofold. Number one, the dungeons themselves really didn't change all that much after you first get introduced to them. You lay down tiles, and you move towards things. Every once in a while, you move away from things because there's a guy chasing you, and you have to like sacrifice your minions in order to slow him down. But largely, like that that was all that Guild Engineering offered in terms of dungeon design. In terms of characters, it didn't have any. And so, like, what I'm trying to say here is that I don't literally mean it had no characters, but I mean, you had the narrator, which didn't change a bit from the beginning. There was no character development on him. The actual, like, adventurers were literally cardboard cutouts. And it was very hard to feel connected to that world. It was very much a experience and an experiment in gaming as opposed to a good solid game. It was a solid attempt. I'm glad I went ahead and like got into it. I'm glad that I played it, but I wouldn't necessarily, I'm not going to go out and be like, oh yeah, this game was really good, you should play it. And so I won't. Moving on, our average games, there's three of these. The first of our average games is Borderlands. So Borderlands is interesting. Borderlands is we had to talk about this when I was playing it, but Borderlands 1 is it was very clear that 2K didn't really know what they were doing yet. And even Sanea was like, you can skip Borderlands 1. I refuse to. And I'm glad I didn't. I do feel like I know the characters better. But it was very, very telling, like how minor the character's characterization was, and how kind of straightforward and non-efficient the plot was. Like at the beginning of the game, the plot is set up as, um, you're a vault hunter, you're looking for a vault, and the end of the game is you found the vault. Like, it was mostly just going around, experiencing the world, and the character, like the actual core gameplay, it felt like they thought they were making a like gritty and somewhat desolate game where you go around this like wasteland and you're trying. It almost felt like they started off as a very like grim, rough existence, and they ended up with, they were like, let's have more fun with it, and some of the side quests really started to show that Borderlands charm, but the main story holding everything together just didn't, and it made the whole experience feel a little bit like collapsy. Also, the fact that the Vault Hunters didn't really have any characterization given to them intentionally. I'm very glad they changed that in later games because it just, I had no connection to my character, which meant I had no connection to the world. It was like the plot was straightforward. The characters weren't, like the character I was playing didn't really feel that interesting. And that's why it's an average game. The actual, like, playing with Sanea made that game for me. I said this before. I tried to play Borderlands several years ago, and I gave up on it because it was not fun. And it was because I was not playing with a person that I wanted to play with. So, Sanea makes Borderlands an average game. Actually, honestly, I put Borderlands as low as I did because I was trying not to count Sanea as part of the equation. Even with Sanea, it would probably go up to a good game because I thoroughly enjoyed hanging out with her. Second average game is Vampire the Masquerade, Shadows of New York. I deeply enjoyed Shadows of New York. I thought it was a really, really, like, much, much better than Coteries of New York. I felt much more connected to my character. I felt like the first game, it was really just sort of like stuff was happening and it didn't make sense. They put you in the realm of a human and then you got turned, but they didn't spend enough time with you as a human to make that experience feel legitimate, if that makes sense. Like, it started, there was the big traumatic thing that was changing my life, but I didn't feel like I was really tied into my life in Coteries. Shadows of New York kind of sidestepped that problem by starting you off as someone that's been a vampire, but you like your interest in the character is as a vampire, and so you learn about them as they are, not as they were, and then suddenly changed away from what you just learned. I also really, really liked the idea, like the clan. I had a lot more. I felt like the clan in Coteries did nothing, and was a wasted option that didn't affect the story at all. So I did not mind the clan option being taken away in Shadows, and the clan I actually ended up with was a super interesting clan. So, very, very happy. That was a song. I hope you liked it. The thing that kind of keeps it being average is, first of all, it's a visual novel. And visual novels, like first-person shooters, cough, Borderlands cough, are not my preferred way of playing a game. It ends up being just a massive amount of reading, and my voice kind of gives out on me, which is the master and commander of no fun. And then the other thing that kind of like holds it back was just that I kind of felt like that they put a lot of effort into your relationship with your thrall, who ends up betraying you, but I didn't really like. I didn't buy into that relationship all that much. So it ended up like it was certainly a more interesting plot than Borderlands' plot, but it was also a plot that kind of felt told instead of experienced, if that makes sense. And our third and final average game, Dishonored, Death of the Outsider. I love Dishonored 1. And that is one of the problems, is that because this is a Dishonored game, I have very, very high hopes for it. And both Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsider let me down in the same way. So, Dishonored 1, you go out on these assassination contracts. You would kill someone, and then you would go back to the pub. And in the pub were all of your co-conspirators, and you would talk to them. And they had their own lives going on. Like, one guy had the hots for the, maid girl. And then there was, like, this aristocratic lady that didn't really trust anyone else. And you could like, give her advice, and you would end up saving her life by telling her about a place to hide in case something happened, because, spoiler alert, it happened. It felt like there was a good 30 minutes of walking around talking to people, exploring, finding stuff out between the missions, and it was this really, really nice cool down period before things got tense again. Both Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsider did away with that. The, like, safe area was much, much smaller. Both times it was basically a boat, and there was, like, one other person on the boat, maybe. In Death of the Outsider, sometimes there was no one else on the boat. So it was just like you would go there and you would look around. It would take 5 minutes, and then you were back to another mission, and the missions were like super tense, and you're having to look around and you don't want to get caught. So I didn't really feel like I had that cooling off period that I had in the first game, and it just made the whole experience feel more like a slog because I never got to relax and enjoy myself. It was just like a tense game almost from beginning to end. Every once in a while they would have sections where I could move around like I wasn't in areas I wasn't allowed to be in. But those felt very, very rare. But that was the downfall in gameplay. The story was actually really good. I very much enjoyed and appreciated the storyline. The concept of playing as Billy Lurk, who was one of the assassins from the first game, was fascinating. Way, way, way better than Dishonored 2, where you're either playing as Corvo again, but this time you're playing as Regent Corvo, where you're trying to get the throne back, which trying to play as an outlaw to bring justice is way different than trying to play as effectively the king, wanting to hold on to your crown. Like, I didn't buy into that. And you could also play as Emily in 2. I actually did play as Emily in 2, but it was the same problem again. It's a lot harder to root for someone in power than to root for someone that has been framed for something. So I couldn't buy into my role in 2 as well as I could in Death of the Outsider, which does make Death of the Outsider like a little bit higher on my list. It's probably my second favorite Dishonored game. And then also, like, just the natural progression of learning what to do was a lot of fun in Dishonored. I would recommend that. Like, if someone hadn't played the Dishonored series, I'd say play Dishonored 1. If you like it, play Death of the Outsider or Dishonored 2. If you don't, then don't keep playing it. That's why it's an average game. It's not a good game, but for me, it was highly enjoyable to play. Now, we do have 2 underrated games. We do have 2 games that I'm not actually going to put into a category, but if I did, it would probably be a good game, but it's hard to consider them. The first one is Richard Scarry's How Things Work in Busy Town. This was actually a redeem that Crom had me play over the course of the game, or over the course of the year, and I very, very much enjoyed it. The reason it's unrated as opposed to good is that it's not really a game. Like, it's an educational simulation. I can't talk about the plot because there isn't any, but there's not supposed to be any. Like, it's way different than talking about Guild Engineering, which just had a lackluster plot. This is a game for kids to teach them how the world works. And so I kind of have to look at it with a different lens than I would if I was playing, any other actual game. But in terms of, like, what it's actually attempting to do, I really, like, the songs were really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing about the songs, and they were amazing. I also extremely much appreciated the fact that you could mess up and have slightly different things happen, and just the, like, building different things to go around. Like, I only played it for one night. It wasn't a very long game, but I could very, very easily see, especially someone that's, like, younger, like, 5 or 6. You just spend forever in there pressing buttons, watching things happen. It was it was adorable. It was great. I can't really rate it as a game. I certainly wouldn't recommend it to other people. I wouldn't say, hey, you gotta play this, but I enjoyed my time there and it felt really good. And the other unrated game is StarCraft Mass Recall. So, here's the thing. Like, I don't put games that I replay on this list. You don't get to, like, be remeasured just because I replayed you again. I played a lot of games for a second time that I'm not putting on this list. Final Fantasy VIII, Persona 3, etc. But Mass Recall was a new mod. It was a different experience. And if I was going to rate Mass Recall by itself, divorcing it from StarCraft that I already played, honestly, it would go into the bleh category. Like, Mass Recall, the enemies were way too aggressive, and it just made the game not fun to play, which is a real shame because I love StarCraft, and I refuse to have StarCraft be in the bleh category. Plus, kind of feels like, hey, if you take this game and you take out everything you love about it, what's left? The stuff I don't love. So it didn't feel fair to actually rate it, but also didn't feel fair to count all the greatness of StarCraft and put it into a great game because the Mass Recall mod was not good. It did not enhance my experience. I actually stopped playing it and went back and played the remastered edition. But I did actually beat the game for the first time in my life. I cheated to win when I was a wee little rockling, but this time I actually beat it. And I have a proud. That's a very technical term. I have a proud. So now we move up to the good games. There are 5, count them, 5 good games. So, the first of them is The Messenger. The Messenger is a really interesting, like, side-scrolling, adventure game, where kind of similar to, like, I'm going to say Contra in terms of how it's presented, although you don't have a gun, you have a sword, and so it's not quite the same as Contra. I guess a Ninja Gaiden is way better at comparison. In fact, it kind of takes me out of Ninja Gaiden. What's really interesting is that every time you hit an enemy with your sword, you get your double jump refreshes. So you can actually, like, traverse, but it takes a lot of very meticulous and specific movement, and then you get to move around. The soundtrack is really good, and it goes from 8-bit to 16-bit, which is a really interesting change. The story is relatively interesting. You go through, there's these like people that come in, and like every time you die they bring you back to regret, and whenever you beat the game you become one of them, but they forget to tell you you're supposed to watch over your next charge, and so he dies, and then you're like, oh wait, I just thought that happened. So you end up having to do his quest for him, so you end up playing through the game twice. The big problem that I have is that it very much feels like a game that you win, and then you just keep exploring, and there's more and more stuff to unlock, and frankly, I hate that. I want the game to be full and satisfying when the credits roll. I don't want to feel like it's okay to have post-game content, but post-game content should not feel necessary and relevant to enjoying the experience, if then that makes sense, and it should, because it does make sense. That's what holds it back from being great, is the ending of the game left me with a little bit of a sour note in my mouth. I was like, I'm done with it, and I feel like getting the rest of it would be very meticulous and not fun to do, so I didn't do it, but it was very obvious that there was more, like, plot necessary stuff behind the annoyance. So just in general, boo at that. Frustration. Very technical word for frustration. The next of our good games is Metal Hellsinger. I'll be honest, I never thought I'd play a game like this. I don't like first-person shooters, as I've said before, even though I played 3 of them this year. But Metal Hellsinger was such an interesting and weird change on that formula. The fact that your actions had to fall on beat, almost like a Crypt of the Necrodancer, but it was a first-person shooter, and so you're like dodging attacks and doing just and having to reload and fire at certain things. It was a lot of fun, and the songs got more and more fleshed out the higher your combo streak got. So you were very much like, you got more points for doing it on beat, but you also got in-game rewards because the fact you get to hear these songs, and the songs were so amazingly fire. Like, seriously, overall, in terms of like, I do a WWE thing, and my intro theme on my Rocket character is Stygia from Metal Hellsinger. I just absolutely love and adore this game. What holds it back from being a great game is the fact it is such a niche game. Like, it's not a game I should naturally enjoy, if that makes sense. It's a first-person shooter, which I don't like. It's a rhythm game, which I don't play. But, oh, it was such a great experience. It was such a I'm so glad it got recommended. I'm so glad. I would have never played this, and my life would have been less complete by virtue of not completing it. But again, it can't be a great game because I have no interest in going back and playing it again, if that makes sense. I guess that's the big question. Would I, if someone's like, hey, would you replay this? For it to be a great game, I have to say yes. And it has to be a game with no obvious flaws. Metal Hellsinger has no obvious flaws, but for me, it's not a game I want to replay, and that holds it back. Similarly, number 3 in my good games but I would not want to replay is DuckTales Remastered. My god, this was a slice of my childhood right now. It felt so good. Good. I don't know what's wrong with me. I swear, you know that filter where you say this is stupid, I shouldn't say it? I don't have that. I don't know how that works. But the thing about DuckTales, is that, like, the remaster made everything so amazing. They got the original voice actors back in order to reprise their roles. Everything just sounded like it was cut out of Rocco when she was like 6 years old, and it was thoroughly enjoyable to go through it. It was like The Messenger. It was a side-scrolling adventure game. You got to use your heckin' pogo stick and just move around and get all of the stuffs, and it was horrendous and yay. And I got to make Gizmo Duck and to be a superhero, and I got to beat up on Count Duckula, and it was really good, and I had fun, and you can just tell as we get more and more. I live in happiness to remember these games. The reason it's a good game and not a great game is, again, I don't want to replay it. I kind of feel like that's an experience that does not get better on repeat. And then number 2, honestly, I don't think there is a number 2. The story was interesting. It changed reasonably. I kind of felt like things kept happening. I guess the big thing on number 2 is that it constantly reinforced the fact that I didn't get all of the money, which feels very, very appropriate for Scrooge McDuck, but I want to swim around in a full treasure vault. But oh my gosh, and swan diving into the money was just such a great addition. Oh, I had so much fun. The 4th of our good games, Stray. You guys, I got to be a cat. I got to play as a cat. It was a little, orange tabby cat, and it had one brain cell. And it was amazing. And he licked himself, and he fell off, and he licked his leg until his leg felt better. And it was so good to be a cat. It's so good to be a cat. Meow meow. No, it was a relatively short game. It only took me 2 streams to beat, but oh, I enjoyed being a cat so incredibly much. They spent so much time making the controls. They had like these mocap cats, and it just, everything felt amazing, and it was just I love Stray. Stray is the best. Stray is the best. The thing that holds it back from being a great game, number 1, is the fact that I kind of felt like Some people got super emotional when they played this game. Like, at the end, your little robot companion ends up shorting itself out in order to let you back into the world above. But the big problem is I was so in I'm a cat mode that, like, I didn't feel... First of all, they kind of gave away that was going to happen. And secondly, I don't feel like a cat's gonna have a lasting connection with a thing that can't even pet it. Like, I'm sorry. I was not able to move my human emotions into cat body. As a cat, like, already the cat was way more driven because it was being controlled by me than any cat has any right to be. And so, like, that disconnected me from the character a little bit. I think it's a necessary thing, but it kind of kept me from getting fully engrossed in the stories Trey was trying to tell. The other thing that keeps it from being a great game, I talked about this before with The Messenger. The ending thoroughly frustrated me because at the beginning of the game you're in this little cat colony with 2 other cats, and you get to snuggle with them and you get to play with them and you get to pounce on them, and it's just like you have a little cat family. And the end of the game sees you escaping the city and getting back into that area, but it doesn't actually show you getting back to your cat family. And I need to see that. My heart needs to see my little orange tabby getting back with his calico friend and his black kitty friend. And the fact they didn't show that, just, it's like an ice knife in the heart at the end. Like, I wasn't torn up by the fact my robot buddy died. I was torn up by the fact I didn't get to see the other cats. Right? I'm not here to see a robot. I'm here to see cats. Show me the cats. And the 5th and final of our good games are AI, the Somnium Files. Oh boy, this was a long game, but it was such a good game. Here's the thing, and this is exactly why I don't review games until the end, because this game would have been an average game until the ending happened. The ending ends up twisting your understanding so much, and the game makes so much more sense as soon as you actually make it to the end. I'm not going to go into, like, spoiling what happens in the game. I'm just going to say it starts off as there's a lot of really weird stuff here, and my god, they're leading hard into conspiracy theories, and I'm not sure that I'm fully into that. Like, I don't know that I love this, but then by the ending of the game, like, you find out that so much stuff was a red herring and it was distracting you from what was really going on, and all the clues were there, but you just ended up missing them, and the characters end up being lovable, and, like, the game ends with a Korean movie style dance-off, which is just the stupidest and weirdest ending, but somehow it totally works, and I just absolutely adore this ridiculous excuse for a game. It's amazing. The thing that stops it from being a great game for me is that they reuse the same pervy jokes over and over and over again. I swear at least 3 times, maybe 4 throughout the course of the game, you get into a rough situation and then you end up being told there's porn nearby and that gives you superpowers. And it's like, the first time was dumb but a little bit funny, but it did not need to be repeated. And I just got very annoyed by the fact that that kept recurring. And whenever I think about AI, that's the one I'm just like, oh, I wish they didn't have that. So everything else was, like, really good. Like, I didn't have any complaints except for that. But a major complaint does keep you from being a great game. Speaking of great games, we do have 3 games in our great category. My games of the year, the games I would recommend without reservation to just about anyone, unless someone was just like, no, I hate this type of game. The first on our great list is Borderlands 2. So Borderlands 2 is everything that Borderlands 1 wasn't. The characters were way more fleshed out, especially in the DLC. The plot was legitimately super interesting. The NPCs, like, I absolutely love Handsome Jack. I love Tiny Tina. I really enjoy, like, Roland had he actually had less personality. He wasn't as happy, but he really moved the plot along. Lilith was a lot more relevant to the game. I really felt like their personalities shone through. Um, the quests were funny. They were amazing going through, and like we did absolutely everything. 'Cause I did not want to miss a moment of Borderlands 2, and we basically didn't. Like there were a few quests we were like, "This is stupid. I don't want to do it." But for the most part, we explored every crevice that game had to offer. And oh my gosh, I would absolutely pull anyone that wanted to play Borderlands 2 into Borderlands 2. Um, I'm about to start Yakuza, I think 4. It's actually funny that the vote got closer, and I may go ahead and just restart Yakuza with Yakuza 0. But I am playing Yakuza instead of another Borderlands game, and I'm a little bit mad about it because I want to play another Borderlands game. But also, I'm really happy to be playing all Yakuza, so I'm not really mad. But Borderlands is such a good series. Borderlands is like fattening. It's amazing. I love it. So happy that Sanaya dragged me in to playing the Borderlands series. And Tiny Tina's like Solid Dragon Keep DLC is just the perfect blend of D&D and amazement. Our next great game, Ori and the Will of the Wisp. Oh my god, I just want to sit here and listen to the Ori music. The Ori soundtrack is so good and so, like, I can be in the middle of bawling my eyes out. I can be super emotional and distraught. And if the Ori soundtrack comes on, I instantaneously calm down and it mellows me out. And it's such a bit of gaming bliss. I don't know a better word to describe it. It's amazing, and it makes me super plus happy. The real thing, my big takeaway from Ori is that most everything else I've talked about, as I've done this top 10, as I've gotten into the good and the great, I'm just so, like, eager and excited and hyped to remember this game. Ori isn't like that. Ori is like a sense of tranquility as I remember it. It was thoroughly enjoyable. The controls were tight. I really enjoyed being able to traverse the areas. The boss encounters occasionally frustrated me, especially that last one. Oh my god. Although honestly, that was me playing for too long. But it was just this. You know how I talked about how like in Stray, I didn't get as emotionally attached to some of the characters. Ori did not give me that same problem. Like I very much felt for every single major character in that piece, and just it's interesting. It's the story of nature pushing back against corruption. I almost feel like it could be a like retold as pollution destroying the world, but they didn't want to get that political, so instead they just made it like generic corruption. But the thing this is such a weird reference, but when I played Resident Evil 2, the thing I absolutely adored and loved was going in there room by room, slowly clearing out an area of threats and creating a safe zone within a safe and like a relaxing and protected area within constant danger. It was like taking back from corruption, and Ori very much had that same theme of going out and returning a world to its natural splendor. It was a fantastic game that I heartily enjoyed. The last of the great games, and my game of the year, if I absolutely had to pick a game of the year, Jedi Survivor. So, my complaint about Jedi Fallen Order was that Cal Kestis was like a toasted bread. Like, he really didn't have a lot of personality. The story kind of felt like you were finding stuff out, but you didn't really feel attached to it. They fixed that in Survivor. Cal's storyline, I felt a lot more attached to Cal as I went through and played it, and that was amazing. That was the most fantastic, wonderful excursion that I have personally ever had. It was, it made me really, really, really happy. Um, just because Cal was super plus, like, going through, first of all, being able to explore a Star Wars world that well realized was amazing. Like, I'm not a massive Star Wars fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I did watch the movies, and it's one of those things where something that you saw as a child, and being able to just walk around in three-dimensional space, it's the same thing, the same allure that World of Warcraft had for me, because like I played Warcraft 2 and 3 when I was super young. Okay, 3 not so much. 3 didn't come out when I was super young, but then when I would go around and actually walk through these areas, it was amazing, amazing content for me. Jedi Survivor did the same thing. The controls frustrate. I'm not gonna lie, but it's the kind of frustration like Dark Souls where in the moment you're super, super, super mad at it, and as soon as you beat it, you're like, I'm an amazing player. Doop, 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 doop. I like doop, 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 doop. But yeah, like Jedi Survivor, it's my game of the year. What makes it better than Ori? Apples and oranges. It's not better than Ori, but I think the big difference is that Ori the Will of the Wisp puts me at peace, whereas Jedi Survivor, like, makes me excited. I would replay both of them. They're both great games. They're in the great games section. Of course, I would replay them. But my emotional state in playing Ori is very different than when playing Jedi Survivor. And, like, Ori gives me peace, whereas Jedi gives me, like, makes me feel, not expertise, but it makes me feel accomplished. And that's a different mood, but I don't always need to feel peace, but I always need to feel accomplished. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. If you're on YouTube, more videos are coming, I promise. If you're not on YouTube, well, let's get started with Yakuza.